Well, hello everybody, welcome to Red Tool House. On today's video, we're going to start setting our backbone fence for our new pasture for our pigs, and we're using some of this old oil pipe that we've talked about in past episodes to be the main support. So come check it out. So just about, 20 minutes, took me longer to get everything set up. I started cutting some of this oil pipe, gas pipe, whatever you want to call it. Some of it has a little bit of a bend in it, you can see, but it still will function. I've been cutting it 5-foot lengths. That'll give me the height that I want and still be able to drive it in the ground deep enough. Now this last piece, I cut at 6 feet because I want it to be my anchor. It's going to be my starting post and it'll have the most tension on it. We may still have to cross brace it. We'll see how that goes. So this spot right here will be my corner. So this is, you can see my road. I've shown this before. This area is actually some fill from a while back, so I know I can drive pretty deep there. But we'll set the corner there, and then we're actually going to turn and go down and catch the road and go on down. So this is a logical corner here, just to give you bearings. There's the barn way down there in the valley. House is over there. So we're a decent click away from the existing pasture that the pigs have access to. This will be our boar pen where the boars will hang out. So we're going to set a post here and then take our backbone line all the way down this way, kind of follow the road, maybe 100 yards, 75 yards. Okay, so my battery died last night before I could video the setting of these posts. So I've got 5 posts in place now, pipe posts. This is the back corner, and of course the front corner is all the way around the turn there of the road. So what I'm going to do now is loosely stretch my wire, and that'll give me an idea where I need to do fill-in. I got some extra pipe, even got my little 4-footers that even if I drive them in lower, I think I'll be okay. But these are my 5 primary posts. And so we'll run wire all the way to this post, and this will be a terminus. So we'll have the wire attached here tightly. So when I go to tension on the other end, I'll have the tensioner closer to the house, tension on the other end, then this will be the end. And then when we go to expand the pasture this way further, then of course this will be the direction stretching that way toward my road. So let's stretch some wire out. So starting here on my front corner, I have one of these wire tensioners, and somewhere on this property is my tensioning handle, and I cannot find it, and I hate to go buy another one, because as soon as I buy it, I'm going to find where I left that one. But I know I can think back in my mind. I thought, I need to hold on to this handle and put it somewhere so it's easy to access when I need to go tighten fence. I have no idea where that is, so shame on me. But anyway, there's a handle that makes this a little easier. Right now you can use a screwdriver or just do it by hand. Again, we're not going to put super tension on this yet until we get all of our posts in place to figure out high and low spots. But what I normally do, I have a ton of this 17 gauge wire that I've replaced all my old pig pastures with. So to burn some of that up, sometimes I'll use that as a non-electrified section, maybe even take it and double it up so it's twice as strong. And of course we're going to be using 14 gauge on the actual electrified wire I don't use 17 anymore anywhere unless I absolutely have to or I'm running out. Stuff breaks like crazy. Deer go through it all the time. So we're gonna tension this up and start rolling it out and see what we need to do to fill in the gaps. Good night. Bleeding like a stuck pig. So this will be my non-electrified portion. And as I put the tensioner here, then actually I electrify the tensioner. I know I've seen some people that don't. I haven't really run into an issue with that. So I'm going to put it in like that. If I don't bleed out first. Now you may be wondering, well, dummy, instead of just sitting there twisting 17 gauge, why don't you just cut a little section of your 14 gauge off and use it? Well, I could, but the fun thing about taking that off the roll, I've got that so wound tight that every time I go to cut a piece off of it, I stand a chance of it actually bird's nesting, just completely coming unspooled there, and that makes it a pain in the butt. So I try not to take the tension off this until I'm actually ready to run some fence. All right, so one other thing I'm going to do, I've got a lot of this extra irrigation hose, this little it's probably 1/4 inch drip irrigation hose, and I'm going to go ahead and start a section of it on my 14 gauge wire. So as I get down to some of these trees where I'm going to fence staple them to a board that's screwed to the tree, then this will provide as insulation to keep the fence from grounding out. And it's a nice, decent, thick, it's outdoor grade, UV resistant, all that type of stuff. So it should hold up pretty well. And I don't need a whole bunch of it. So I'm just going to cut maybe, I don't know, we'll say 20 inches off of it here. And to keep with the continuity of my fence line, of course, I don't want to have a bunch of breaks. I'm going to go ahead and thread that on, and I can just slide it down to the tree. There's 2 potential trees that I'll be attaching to. So I'll put one end here closest to the first tree, and then when I go to put the terminus on the other end, then I'll slide a piece on for the tree closest to that end. Now, another thing, I don't know if this is right or not, but it seems to work. Another thing I like to do is take this extra slack here, and when I start spooling this up, tensioning it up, then it leaves this pigtail, and this will be a non-tensioned end. It'll just be the dead horse, if you want to use that terminology. And when I take the fence and go this way, same thing, I'll have a tensioner here, and I'll have another dead horse, and I put those and tie those together. That's what I actually splice together, so my splice doesn't actually have any tension on it. It still electrifies everything fine, but I'm not relying on that splice to hold tension. So that little pigtail gives me some of that extra leeway there to have some margin of error. And right now I'm just going to bend it over, crimp it so it doesn't come out of there. I feel like Wile E. Coyote in the cartoons where he was running the tripwire for the TNT. Okay, so I have that all stretched out from my starting point to my terminus and have it roughly laying where it's supposed to be. Went on you can see kind of, I don't know if you can see it hanging on the top of that post there. Goes on the outside of that post there, outside of that post. And you can see that little tiny shiny thing. That's the roll there at the terminus. So I don't have that tension, just have the roll laying on the ground. And since we have such uneven topography here, the way the land rolls is I'll just start here adding some tension and just figuring out the height. There's a high spot right here where this little stump is, so that will make the fence too low, so I know I'll have to put a post there to lift it up, and maybe even over that little wash, something to push it down. blah, blah, blah. So this is the mundane, boring parts of doing all of this. Okay, so here's my strategy to this. It's the way I've always done it, and there may be a simpler way. So if you guys have experience with another way of doing this, comment below. But what I do is pull the wire tight, obviously with the line that I want, but I'm looking for the highest spot in a run. So what's the highest peak of the line that I'm following? And that's why I set the camera up like that, so maybe you can gun sight this with me. But it looks like, I don't know if my fat head's in the way there, but it looks like the highest point is probably right here. Now this clearing that I'm in, I really don't want to drive a deep post in, something that's going to be more permanent, because sometimes I pull down here with my tractor to mow this. I don't know if I'll need to in the future, but I like to have that option. And if I drive one of those pipes in, getting it out isn't the easiest thing. And so I want a little more versatility there. So that's why in my previous video talked about our plan with our fence post was to be a hybrid of quite a few options. So I'm going to use a T-post here, and maybe even where the camera is standing. That way I can drop these pretty quickly. You can obviously you can take a T-post out, put the wire on the ground, throw the T-post in the ground, and drive over it with the tractor pretty easily. Whereas if this was more permanent post, it'd be a little trickier to do. So again, comment below if you guys have an easier way of how you line this out with uneven ground. Now, you people from the Midwest, I don't want to hear any comments, because it's flat as a pancake where you guys are. So if I determine the height that I need on this insulator, with the wire in it, of course, then that could give me a pretty good idea of where I need to go up or down. So now I'm going to use this as my reference point and go back and fill in the gaps. So based on what I'm seeing here, I think my next attachment point is going to be to this tree, because it's going to lift this fence up a little bit more, and where it's touching the ground about halfway between the tree and the post may not come into play. It's still going to have something there. I don't want it to just be a couple inches off the ground. That's another point as well, is this is a pasture area for my boars. I don't plan on circulating an annual litter through here, so I probably will never have piglets in this area, so I don't have to make it super low to the ground. In fact, dealing with boars, my lowest strand could be maybe 2 feet and still be okay. But I'm not gonna go that high, just in case I change my mind. I don't want to be in a situation where I have to have a whole new fence line run because I've got everything too high, or come back and have to run a second or third strand. So this white oak here, I'm not really that worried about. It's not long for this world, simply because you may look at it and say, oh, that's got all kinds of inclusions. That's really neat for woodworking. Troy, that'd be a beautiful piece of wood to mill. Actually, this is shot full of holes. The reason why it has all these weird inclusions in it is because of lead. High-powered rounds we've been firing into this tree over the past 15 years, actually. We don't shoot this direction anymore. But so that's why this tree, I'm not really worried about killing it. But as I discussed in one of the recent videos about should you attach a fence directly to trees, we had some debate on that, a lot of good feedback from you guys. And I talked about using the board method that I shared from a link. So that's what I'm going to do here. Obviously, having a sawmill, I have absolute tons and tons of cutoffs. So I'm going to just attach a sacrificial poplar. This is poplar 2x4. It's not going to last very long as far as years go. Keep it off the ground, it'll last a little longer. I could use treated. I'm not a big fan of putting treated anywhere unless I absolutely have to. But I've got so much of this scrap that if this completely rot out, the way I'm going to attach this, I could obviously come back and replace the board without any big issue. So I'm going to mount it up a little higher. That way I've got some adjustment here and not have it touching the ground. And I'm just using some basic 3-inch deck screws here to send her on home. need one more in there. Tree's almost too ugly to be able to get a flat board stuck to it. So for this attachment point to the tree, if you remember, putting obviously the little piece of rubber pipe on there. I don't need all this. I'm just going to cut a section. But determining my height that I need, and then taking some fence staples. Now, I referred to this in my last video as horseshoe nails because of the shape. For some reason, that's what we've always called them here. But one of y'all commented, and I think it's You Betcha, and I cannot remember the numbers after, but individuals have been commenting on the channel for a long time. Appreciate the feedback. Pointed out to me that these indeed are not horseshoe nails. Horseshoe nails are what you use to nail horseshoes onto horses. And that person is exactly correct. So these fence staples, and You Betcha, thanks for the shout out there. So we're going to use these fence staples and just attach it. So the pipe forms an insulation around the wire, and that allows us to obviously not ground out. So I'm just going to pick a spot here. I think this would be good. We want to snug and not crimp. So there, it's got just a little bit of a bite. And then I'm just going to take my handy dandy razor knife here. And I'm just going to cut through the rubber. There we go. So I can slide this on down to my next tree. Something about hammering and fence post driving that pipe. It's so loud I have to put PPE on. It hurts my head. Okay, so now we're going to put our nice little clip-in insulators here. Those black ones that I like so well. I'm going to make sure our height is consistent. And may try, I'm using the self-tapping screws, may try a pre-drill first and see if that helps with time. When I was using just the self-tappers, took a little bit. But we're going to give it a shot here and just see. That, my friends, I believe, was a Harbor Freight drill bit. We're going to go to the self-tapping screws, and we're not going to mess with pre-drilling right now because I think it'll save more time. All right, now that was not edited out. That was much quicker than drilling. Okay, so first 4 positions in place, and I think we've got the right elevation we need. So now it's time to just keep on trucking. My next spot will be attaching to this tree. There's the post behind it. Next post, there's a post behind that oak. And of course where you see my roll of wire hanging out. So I'm not going to take you all through all that drudgery. We'll just summarize when we get to the end. If we get to the end, it's almost dinner time and I'm ready to eat my shoe. So my stomach may win out over my ambition to get this done tonight. Leaving a trail of blood on everything. That'll draw the coyote in. Or the sharks. All right, so I got the terminus tensioned up just by obviously tightening and pulling all the slack I could by hand. So let's give a couple cranks on our tensioner here, and then we can go inspect the line and see what we've got. It'd be much easier if somebody had their tool. And they set the camera down. All right. Okay, so here's our first issue. About 10 inches off the ground there with our insulator connector, and about 10 inches off the ground there. But if you see, because of the low spot, this is hitting me right at the bottom of the pocket. So we're going to have to find the lowest spot and put a post in there. All right, so hopefully you can see that. Look at this, stick out of the way. Brought that down, obviously put an angle in it there so you can see coming from the big oak tree there, coming down the hill, and then through this just little tiny wash there is where I stuck that pipe to hold it. So that keeps it, my hand in the shot here, about 10 inches. And this is where I come back. If there'd be an issue where a boar's stepping over here or a pig stepping over, this is where I come back and use a step-in post, one of the cheaper posts, to lift this up some, and or come back with a second strand. Again, I'm not quite sure what I'm going to have to do with the old bores here. That's new territory for me. I've got one last spot here near the terminus. The camera's sitting right on the terminus, but just more of a contour. If I had this fence following this way a little bit, coming right chair like that, then we could follow that embankment and be better off. So that's what I'm going to do. Stick that right there. And send that home. But before I do, just want to take this opportunity to say what everybody's saying, and just I don't know that it can be heard enough, but in this crazy time that's going on right now, just pray for one another, look out for one another, take care of one another. Seek out your neighbors. Even if you're in the middle of nowhere like us, you still have neighbors, so seek them out, make sure they're okay, especially the elderly. Take care of them, and just check to see, again, if you're a homesteader that has a lot of provision, then share that with your neighbors. This is definitely uncharted territory for all of us, so I pray that you guys take care, stay safe, and look out for one another. And I appreciate everyone that subscribed. I think we just hit 40,000 last week. It's exciting. That milestone doesn't have any bearing with YouTube, but for me, it's neat when you hit those key marks. So 40,000 now, on to 50,000. So appreciate everybody watching. Appreciate you subscribing. All right, take care, everybody.